without a moment's hesitation, replied, "Of course, Your Highness." Everyone waited for his final response. But he hesitated for a long time, making the court officials lean in, wide-eyed and ears pricked. After what felt like an eternity, the left minister finally spoke. "As a Confucian scholar, my position has been clear. However, for the peace of the nation, I will set aside my opinion this time." The prince agreed. "You're right. The issue is the budget." He mentally calculated the tax revenue from the provinces, the income from various tax departments, and then said, "Crown Prince, is it really impossible to reduce the number from 20? Yang, realizing that asking for more might result in nothing, quickly conceded. "I follow your command, father." The prince then issued an order. The number of successful candidates in the preliminary exam will be increased this time. Additionally, as many departments require officials proficient in mathematics, following the Crown Prince's suggestion, mathematics will be included. "Everyone," he continued, "adjust the number of personnel needed for each department and report back to me. These adjustments will be based on the Crown Prince's earlier proposal. Cut the numbers in half. I expect all of you to set aside greed and make concessions to achieve harmony." Immediately, the officials responded in unison. "We will obey your command, Your Highness." Yang's eyes lit up as he devised a plan to find the best talents. Surely, there had to be a brilliant strategy for this. A few days later, at the Li family estate, the voice of a servant urgently called out, Master, there are officials from the government here to see you." Hearing this, Sun Ji's parents rushed out excitedly. Officials from the government? Could it be? And indeed, it was. Sun Ji's father was overjoyed, while his mother couldn't hold back her tears. Without wasting a second, Sun Ji's father ran straight to the study, flinging the door open, startling Sun Ji, who hurried to hide what he was working on. With tears of happiness in his eyes, his father exclaimed, "Sun Ji, we've just received word that you passed the preliminary exam." "Well done, my son." Overcome with joy, his father shouted, "We must celebrate. Quickly, let's prepare a feast." Sun Ji was still deep in solving mathematical problems. Upon hearing the news, he let out a long sigh. "Now that I have to prepare for the final exam, I'll have to say goodbye to arithmetic for a while. The unsolved problems will surely pile up." Meanwhile, Hurong was in conversation with Scholar Trong. "I'm meeting with you today, Scholar Trong. For this reason, the secret competition to select the most outstanding candidates will be more intense than ever." Scholar Trong nodded. "Indeed, there will be a lot of pressure on the Ministry of Rights, the department responsible for this." Hurong confidently replied, but his words made Scholar Trong skeptical. So he asked, "How are we going to manage this?" Hurong laid out his plan. "I intend to appoint you, Scholar Trong, as the chief examiner of the final exam. Your expertise in mathematics is well known, thanks to your excellent achievements. If we make a concerted effort, nominating you as the chief examiner won't be difficult, still doubtful." Scholar Trong asked, "Do you think the other departments will object?" Hurong continued his explanation, which seemed to convince Scholar Trong. "Additionally, I will suggest that each department nominate one person to serve as a chief examiner for this final exam. This way, everyone will agree with the proposal." He elaborated on his plan. "All the exam papers will be graded in front of the chief examiners. This is just the beginning. The name of this plan is UN. And our goal is to select the top 5 scholars with the highest scores in mathematics to join the research institute." Hearing this, Scholar Trong was filled with confidence and said with praise, "I understand, Your Highness, we will definitely succeed." Before long, the final exam took place. At the exam site, an official named Rukgon rubbed his hands together and thought to himself, "Today, I am here to carry out an important task for the young master." For this exam, there were 100 scholars participating in the final round, gathered outside the gate of the Hantan government office. At that moment, the examiners announced, "From now on, scholars will be given numbered tokens. As previously informed, seating will be arranged according to the number on the token. Each scholar will receive a different token number. Anyone caught receiving more than one token will be disqualified immediately. The purpose of distributing tokens is to reduce confusion when confirming the scholars. Therefore, please have a representative pick up your token." If possible, the examiner raised a stack of tokens in his hand and said, "The tokens distributed to each scholar will help prevent mistakes. So please receive your token through your representative. Once the tokens are distributed, names will be called in ascending order. Scholars will be allowed to enter after being checked. The scholars jostled in excitement, but one of them, Juan, found himself sandwiched between two tall and dark men, squished like a piece of meat between two slices of bread. The examiner announced loudly. We will now begin distributing the numbered tokens. Everyone, please form a line immediately. At once, the crowd pushed and shoved, rushing forward to get in line. A group of young masters sat casually in a corner, chatting with each other. It's starting. Do you see that big guy over there? That's my servant. One of them said. Wow, what an impressive figure. Another replied. He's a wrestler I brought back after he won the tournament in town. If we don't manage to get a low number in this competition for the exam tokens, we'll be at a disadvantage when it comes to having our papers read. Exactly. I think sitting between number 3 and number 7 is better than sitting right at the front. They looked over and saw Truck-kun being shoved around by the crowd. Falling over repeatedly, they laughed. Look at that skinny guy. How pathetic. There's no way he'll get a low number. Lee Sun-ji, watching this, grew anxious, nervously biting his nails and silently praying. He had heard that there was a scramble before the exam, but he hadn't expected it to be this intense. Rickon, hang in there. Don't get hurt, he muttered to himself. Nearby, two big, burly men were facing off, neither willing to back down. Lee's servant, fortunately, seemed better than the losing one. Taking advantage of the situation, Truck-kun slipped through the gap between them, seeing an opportunity. The examiners noticed the commotion and shouted loudly. Stop. We will distribute the numbered tokens in the order you are standing. Lee Sun-ji let out a sigh of relief. It's over. No, wait. This is just the beginning. Meanwhile, two of the young masters were happily chatting. We'll be sitting in the front row. No doubt about it. Well done, one said to the other. Then, the voice of the examiner echoed again, reminding the scholars. Line up according to the number on your token. Looking at Jordan, who was bruised all over, Lee Sun-ji said gratefully. Thank you. Jordan, you worked hard. Zuka handed over a token. Here's your number. Lee Sun-ji took it with a smile. All right, thank you. Now leave the rest to me. For a moment, he stared at the number in disbelief, his thoughts stiffening as if frozen. This number. It can't be divided evenly by any other number. He took his seat, almost on the verge of tears. Number 89 out of 100. I can't see anything from back here. The more he thought about it, the more his imagination ran wild, feeling like a small pawn on a giant chessboard. Is this seat a good position? Or am I sitting in the jaws of a tiger? The examiners cleared their throats and spoke into the loudspeaker. Can numbers 80 through 90 at the back hear us? If so, raise your left hand. Lee Sun-ji and the scholar in seat 90 both raised their hands. Responding, we can hear you. What was that? Lee thought, feeling bewildered. What is that strange thing? But then, he shook off the distracting thoughts. Determined. No, I can't let myself fall into this trap of pointless thinking. I just have to try my best. The examiners then began the ceremony by reading aloud. First, I will read the decree from His Highness. Welcome to the royal court. My subjects. The voice rang out. Lee Sun-ji bowed his head, listening to the decree, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. The sound is so clear, he thought, as if it's being spoken right next to me. It almost sounds like an echo. But how does it work? Oh, no, this isn't the time to think about that. After the decree was read, he lifted his head and adjusted his hat. The examiner continued. This final exam will take place over 2 days. Today and tomorrow. Today, you will be tasked with 2 subjects. The 5 classics and the 4 books. Tomorrow will feature arithmetic, the special subject of this exam. Hearing this, Lee Sun-ji was startled. Mathematics? The other scholars were just as confused. Mathematics? What? This isn't a miscellaneous exam. The examiners, hearing the uproar, sternly shouted, silence. All of this is under the great direction of His Highness and has been agreed upon by the ministers of the court. You are not to question it. If anyone cannot accept it, you may leave the exam immediately. Instantly, the hall fell silent. The examiner continued. Now that all is settled, we will begin the first day's examination. If there are no objections, proceed in groups of 5, led by an examiner. Soon after, the first scholar was called up to receive his exam. Lee Sun-ji, sitting far in the back, breathed a sigh of relief. It'll be a while before it's my turn. The farther back you sit, the harder it is to pass. But it's still too early to give up. There's the arithmetic test tomorrow. The first day of the exam came to an end. And the second day began. The examiner announced. The arithmetic subject will be presented directly. Therefore, scholars, remain seated in your assigned spots. As one of the officials handed out the exam papers, he gave instructions. After hearing the guidelines, you may begin your test. Lee Sun-ji responded, understood. He received the exam, feeling anxious. What kind of problems are waiting for me? He thought. This will be interesting as long as it's not the 9 chapters on the mathematical art. When he saw the exam, he was astonished. This field of mathematics deals with number principles. But the problems are laid out horizontally and printed as a single sheet. How innovative. The examiner announced, the time for this exam is 2 hours. The papers have been distributed. Let the exam begin. Lee Sun-ji looked at the questions, grinning with excitement as he licked his lips. There are many interesting arithmetic problems here. But this exam could determine my future. So now's the time to focus. With burning determination, he concentrated all his energy. Ah, of course. The challenge is right here. By late evening, Lee Sun-ji returned to the Lee estate. I'm home, he said. Seeing him, his parents quickly rushed to greet him. Lee Sun-ji, you're back, aren't you? They eagerly asked about the exam. How did the exam go? It was tough, he admitted. But I gave it my best effort. Oh, our son, you've worked so hard, they said proudly. Then, with a smile, he added. However, arithmetic was included in this exam. I heard His Highness personally added it. His father, hearing this, looked confused. Mathematics? What? His mother, on the other hand, was overjoyed. The gods must surely be helping us. 2 days later, in the palace, the AI's voice echoed again. Sir, the grading has been completed. And the scores have been arranged in order from highest to lowest. Thank you, said one of the officials. Was there any difficulty in the supervision and management process? None at all. I was worried there might be chaos during the arithmetic portion. But fortunately, there wasn't any. What do you think of those at the top of the rankings? It would be great if we could secure the top scorer, wouldn't it? Another official replied. Young scholar pondered for a moment. That small piece of paper, smaller than the arithmetic exam itself, luckily landed near me. Not too much, not too little. I have to seize this opportunity now. Suddenly, he slammed the table and stood up, startling the other officials around him. Grabbing the results board, he marched forward. The Assistant Minister of Revenue, seated nearby, quickly intervened. Stop, what are you doing? The Director General instructed me to prepare for a situation like this. But I never expected Scholar Truong to act this way, he said, shaking his head. Young scholar thought to himself. The Assistant Minister of Revenue has stepped in. I never imagined the Ministry of Revenue would send someone of such high rank as the Chief Examiner. With a smirk, he reflected. It's good that person is here. He remembered He Yang's words from before. The Ian strategy becomes even more advantageous when the opponent's rank is higher. Returning to a few days before the final exam took place. At the Imperial Court, the Minister of Revenue came running. Out of breath, he stood at the door, struggling to get his words out. The officials inside turned to look at him. The Right Minister asked. Has the Director General arrived? Is there something the matter? Struggling to speak, he replied. I've heard some news. But before he could finish, the Chief Minister of State spoke up. If it's about the appointment of the Chief Examiners, we already know. You've arrived at the perfect time. Come, sit down. The Minister of Revenue pulled out a document and said. This document contains the list of examiners who will participate in drafting the questions, grading and supervising the final exam. The left minister stroked his beard thoughtfully. Since this exam includes mathematics, there will be a lot of work to handle. However, I still don't understand why Young In-ji was appointed as the chief examiner. The Chief Minister of State agreed. I also don't understand. Young Jo, the Director General. and scholar Young In-ji are both competing for the top 2 spots in the court's mathematics rankings. The left minister added. Moreover, they're like the 2 arms of the Crown Prince. It's clear that His Highness the Crown Prince wants to ensure that the most talented individuals are selected. Isn't this an abuse of power? He asked. The Minister of Revenue clenched his fists in frustration. Exactly. This is clearly an ethical issue. The Chief Minister of State rested his chin in his hand, deep in thought. On the other side of the palace, the prince was in a similar position, engrossed in reading his documents. Suddenly, the chief chef reported. Your Highness, the Director General, Chief Minister Lyric, the Left Minister Hong Hoi, and the Right Minister Mensa Sol wish to meet with you. The prince looked up and said, Let them in. The 3 officials entered, knelt on the ground, and greeted him. Greetings, Your Highness. The prince nodded. All right. The Chief Minister of State, being cautious, began. Your Highness, I Lyric, Chief Minister, offer my respects. But knowing what he was going to say, the prince cut him off. This is about the selection of the chief examiner. Isn't it? I'd been thinking about that too. The chief minister lowered his head and replied. Yes. Your Highness. It's a matter of ethics. The prince, resting his chin in his hand, pondered. I am aware of that. I'm reviewing everything carefully. Encouraged, the chief minister asked. So, does that mean you oppose their appointment this time? The prince hesitated for a moment before asking. But if I don't appoint the 2 of them, who do you think would be suitable? Aren't they the most qualified? If you have any suggestions, let me know. For a moment, the 3 officials remained silent, unsure of how to respond. The prince smiled quietly to himself. In truth, this was all He Yang's idea. He recalled a conversation with He Yang, during which he had said something that left He Yang shocked. Crown Prince, I can't accept your proposal. But father, He Yang protested. The prince explained his reasoning. I understand that you and the other ministers have worked hard to promote mathematics. However, you were the one who suggested adding mathematics to the final exam. Moreover, appointing someone like Director General Yang Zhou as a chief examiner is normal. But Yang Ying is only a scholar. If he were appointed, other issues would arise. The ministers will surely believe you're using your status to recruit the best talents. It will put you in a dangerous position. So, I advise you to let it go. He Yang, hearing this, looked dejected but quickly regained his spirits. In that case, father, what do you think about having each department send 1 person to be a chief examiner? He asked. The prince thought for a moment. Each department. How would that work? Back in the throne hall, the chief minister of state was puzzled and exclaimed. Yes. Your Highness. You're suggesting that each department nominates 1 person as a chief examiner. The right minister was equally confused. But that would mean we'd have 7 chief examiners. The chief minister continued. 7 people working together in a single exam. That's unprecedented. Unexpectedly, the second left minister agreed, much to the surprise of the right minister. I think this is a good idea. Your Highness, he said. The right minister couldn't believe it. Second left minister. Isn't this the best solution we have? Indeed, he replied. The prince, hearing this, gave the order. Then proceed immediately. The sooner, the better. Yes. Your Highness. They all responded. As they left the throne hall, the chief minister of state turned to the second left minister and asked. Second left minister. Why are you in such a hurry? There's still time. Isn't this the best approach we have? That's all there is to it. The second left minister replied. If you had been more adamant, the advantage would have been ours. Isn't that right? No, there's no better option at this point. He added. Besides, we don't have any reason to oppose the prince. If we can convince the Ministry of Personnel and bring them in. Before he could finish, the second left minister interrupted. If the Minister of Personnel hears about the prince's suggestion, he will undoubtedly accept it. Don't you understand? The Ministry of Personnel has always had trouble with staff allocations. Naturally. The Minister of Personnel holds the most significant voice among the 6 ministries. And in this situation, isn't this the best approach? Furthermore, with each department selecting one chief examiner, the Ministry of Personnel will surely seize this opportunity. He fell silent, deep in thought. This must be the Crown Prince's idea. Suddenly, an image of He Yang's smug expression appeared in his mind. He turned to the right minister. Gather the 6 ministers immediately. If we're not careful, the most talented individuals will be taken by the Crown Prince. If that happens, the Ministry of Public Works will be excluded. And he also holds a position in the Research Institute. This will be a battle between us and him. Meanwhile, He Yang was in conversation with Scholar Truong. As you know, my proposal has been accepted. It seems Father understands our intentions. But, Scholar Truong, curious, asked, why is it that the higher the opponent's rank, the more advantageous it is for us? He Yang smiled and explained. If they make a mistake, doesn't that increase the chances of their failure? He Yang smiled and explained. Now I'll tell you the reason why. Since I've already informed them that Scholar Yun will be one of the chief examiners, they will likely appoint people of higher rank in response. At least 2 or 3 individuals of high status will be chosen. This is exactly what I'm aiming for. The higher their rank, the more they will focus on scrutinizing the exams related to literature. Even if they review the arithmetic exams directly, it will be difficult for them to assess the mathematical skills of the candidates accurately. That's why the higher their rank, the more advantageous it is for us. We only need to focus on the candidates' mathematical abilities. You must identify those who excel in mathematics. Don't pick too many, but not too few either. Aim for around 10 to 15 candidates. The scholar listened but seemed slightly confused. I understand, Your Highness. But what did you just say? What does deal mean? He Yang was startled, realizing he had slipped into English. He chuckled and explained. Nothing. It's just a Western word. Deal means agreement. That's all. The scholar repeated the word. Deal? Strange. But it sounds interesting. Back in the present, as the Assistant Minister of Revenue tried to stop Scholar Trong, the two were locked in a heated argument. The Research Institute needs people skilled in mathematics. Everyone here does. The Assistant Minister insisted. Others in the room murmured in agreement. Yes. So young scholar is this kind of person? This is outrageous. Scholar Yang, looking at the score list, said. Fine. Then I'll take the top 5 and the bottom 5. I must follow the Crown Prince's orders. Right? The others protested. No. We need mathematically skilled people too. You can't do that. Seeing the growing opposition, young scholar conceded. All right. I'll take the top 8 candidates then. Outside the royal city gates, the candidates were anxiously waiting for the results. Has the list of successful candidates been posted yet? Not yet. I don't think so. Someone replied. Lee Sun-ji, standing at the very back of the crowd, sighed. There are so many people in front of me. I can't see the questions or the results. The large gates of the royal city slowly creaked open, and 2 officials emerged. The candidates' anticipation grew as they watched the 2 approach the notice board. The officials brushed a layer of glue onto the board and then posted the results. Immediately, the crowd surged forward to see the list. A man in yellow robes pointed to the board and shouted. The list of successful candidates. As soon as the announcement was made, the crowd rushed forward to see the results. I passed. I passed too. I failed again. Lee Sun-ji squinted his eyes, trying to catch a glimpse, but he still couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd. Please make way. Let me through. Before he realized what was happening, Lee Sun-ji was lifted high into the air, exclaiming in surprise. Ah! Jordan's appearance startled him. Jordan? He called out. Jordan smiled and asked. Can you see it now? Young master? Lee Sun-ji smiled back. Aren't I heavy? Jordan responded. I wasn't able to secure a good seat for you, so I must do this instead. Hurry! Check the results. That's easier said than done. Lee Sun-ji muttered as Jordan wobbled beneath him. I still can't see. Young master, Jordan announced, as Lee Sun-ji swayed back and forth. He sighed in frustration. Oh my! You're moving too much. I can't see anything. Rickon urged from the side. Hurry! Young master. Suddenly, a court official grabbed a loudspeaker and spoke. Please keep quiet. From now on, those whose names are called, step forward. Yonghan from Gaesan. Lee Sun-ji from MANHUA. Lee Kanjin from Bai. Mr. Sun. Lee Sun-ji and Jordan exchanged glances. I think he just called your name. Young master. Jordan exclaimed. Yes. That's me. I'm going up. Lee Sun-ji replied. He made his way to another official holding a clipboard. I am Lee Sun-ji from MANHUA. And your original hometown? Aeon Seoul. Here's my exam badge. Lee Sun-ji said, handing it over. The official glanced at the paper. Yes. That's correct. Stand here next to me. As the official counted the candidates, two young men nearby chatted. What are they doing over there? Looks like the shooting range. Yeah. What's going on? One asked. I have no idea. The situation soon split into two groups. Those who passed were invited into the palace, while those who failed sobbed uncontrollably. I'm 40 years old now. What will I do? How can I face my parents? Meanwhile, in the throne hall, the prince reviewed the exam results and said, a total of 185 candidates have passed the final exam. We increased the number of passing candidates, but it's still lower than usual. The left minister stepped forward and replied. Some passed the practical exams and the min gun, but they were disqualified for scoring below 20 in mathematics. The prince, displeased, asked. Isn't that a bit wasteful of manpower? The left minister responded. Yes, Your Highness. But it takes a great deal of time and effort to educate them from the basics. Hearing this, the prince slammed his hand down on his knee and said sternly. I understand. Those who have passed are carefully selected talents for the court, so make sure to utilize them well. He continued. Apart from selecting them, what do you plan to do with those who complete their training in ranks? One official replied. First, like the Sunkin One scholars, we will rank them based on their academic performance and work efficiency. Then they will be evenly distributed among the 6 ministries. As agreed, after a 3-month probationary period, they will receive official appointments. The prince, hearing this, seemed satisfied. I see. But will there be any disputes over the distribution of personnel among the 6 ministries? Everyone was in good spirits. The right minister answered. No, Your Highness. We've almost reached a full agreement. The prince stroked his chin thoughtfully and asked. That's good. However, what if they wish to move on to Sunkin One? This time, the left minister responded. If that's the case, they must start from the lowest rank. But if we think carefully, their work here would be much more beneficial than going to Sunkin One. Besides, many changes are expected at Sunkin One in the near future. For this reason, we plan to send all the scholars there out of office. The prince pondered this for a moment and replied. But not everyone might agree with that. Outside the royal city, an official addressed the crowd. You will be able to begin your work after completing your training. Suddenly, a chubby scholar raised his hand and asked. I aim to take the imperial examination. Will I still be able to attend Sunkin One? The official answered his question. No. Starting this year, the system at Sunkin One will change. All the scholars there will be removed from office. The conditions for participating in the imperial exam will also change. Up until now, those who passed the exam would go to Sunkin One. After studying there for some time, they could face the imperial exam. Only government officials could take this path, with top scholars being from the 5th to 6th ranks and higher-ranking officials from the 3rd to 4th ranks. However, from now on, there will be changes. After passing the official exams, those who wish to become officials and work in literary offices will study at Sunkin 1. The rest will be appointed to lower-ranking positions in the court. They will go through training and a probationary period before receiving an official appointment. There will also be periodic promotion exams. Once they reach the required rank, they will have to take another exam. Only after passing this additional exam will they be eligible to face the imperial exam. After finishing his explanation, the official concluded. That's how it is. He clicked his tongue and added with disdain. If you lack ability, you'll never be promoted. Moreover, you might even be dismissed before you get the chance to be promoted. The chubby scholar raised his hand again, asking. So, I can't just take the imperial exam? The official, suppressing his anger, thought. If someone this incompetent becomes my colleague or subordinate, it would be a disaster. But he remained calm outwardly and responded. Not, new, but, you. Did you even listen to my explanation? Then he lost his temper and shouted. What did I say earlier? If you want to hold a high position in the court, you need to have the ability first. You fool, get out of here. The chubby scholar, stunned and embarrassed, stood there dumbfounded. Wait, am I being expelled? The official slammed his hand on the table and declared. You're dismissed, you idiot, but the chubby scholar wasn't going down without a fight. He retorted. Do you even know who I am? You jerk. The official, now completely fed up, asked. And who exactly are you? The scholar puffed up his chest and boasted. The former Minister of Public Works is my great-uncle. And my cousin works in the Ministry of Justice. Hearing this, General Jiang, who had been observing, scoffed. In the end, you're still nobody. The scholar, enraged, shouted. What did you say? You arrogant fool. The official, losing all patience, ordered the guards. The Taihan Fu and bring Song Chapnia here immediately. If anyone asks, tell them General Jiang of the Ministry of Personnel ordered it. After issuing the command, the official pointed at the chubby scholar and yelled. So, where's the power behind you now? Power, huh? I can dismiss you at will. Understand? This is all by royal decree. Got that? The power behind me is His Highness the Prince. At that moment, Song Chapnia arrived. The official, surprised, exclaimed. Well said, General Jiang. The sudden appearance of Song Chapnia caught General Jiang off guard. Oh, Song Chapnia, how did you get here so quickly? Song Chapnia, filled with fury, replied. I suspected something like this might happen. So I stationed my men here to keep an eye on things. Song Chapnia was a high-ranking official of the Taihan Fu. Holding the 3rd rank, the Taihan Fu had the power to investigate and prosecute corrupt officials and crimes. It was an incredibly powerful institution, capable of approving or even overturning personnel and legal reforms. He then loudly commanded. What are you standing there for? Drag that insolent fool away. As the chubby scholar was dragged away, he cried out in despair. Please, spare me just once. Spare me, I beg you. Meanwhile, General Jiang reminded those who passed the exam. If any of you show misconduct during your training or probation, fall behind in your work, or cause any trouble, you'll be expelled immediately. Understood? At the Taihan Fu, the atmosphere was unusually tense. Two officials were conversing. Song Chapnia, I heard there was an incident during the announcement of the exam results. Wasn't there? Yes, Grand Inspector. The individuals received the documents you sent. Good work. Now deliver this as well. The Grand Inspector said. Song Chapnia took a golden pen in his hand and, with a sly grin, said, Leave that to me. The golden pen bestowed by His Highness. I can sense some corrupt behavior at play here. In the throne hall, the prince was reading a newly submitted memorial. His hands trembled with anger as he read. They've only just passed the exam. And they're already so arrogant? How confident must he be in the power behind him? The prince continued. That one is about the same age as Rio and Yoon, right? The officials all bowed deeply and said in unison. Your Highness. The prince stood abruptly, clenching his fists in fury. No, this isn't a matter for formalities. If there is someone guilty of crimes within the court, I must question the power behind them. What are they up to? He turned to the chief minister and ordered. Immediately instruct the GI Camfu to investigate the family members he mentioned. The chief minister quickly responded. As you command. Your Highness. Elsewhere in the palace, a group of young scholars was walking along. Lee Sun-ji asked the official guiding them. Where are we supposed to go now, sir? The official replied with a statement that left all the scholars shocked. You're going to the Eastern Palace. What? Why are we? The ones who just passed the exam? Being sent to the Crown Prince's residence? The official calmly explained. Of course. You're going there. All of you have been assigned to work at the Crown Prince's Research Institute. What? They exclaimed. The official reassured them. Relax. Even the bravest feel nervous going in there. Then, he muttered under his breath. I wonder if I can get a lighter workload from this. Lee Sun-ji overheard him and quietly remarked. I heard that. A little while later, in the Research Institute, an AI voice rang out. Welcome, everyone. The deputy director of the Research Institute bowed in greeting. I am the deputy director of the institute. The young scholars bowed back. It's our first time meeting you. Greetings, sir. Noticing their bright, sparkling eyes, the deputy director thought to himself. Their eyes are full of life. He imagined them in the future. Tired and constantly asking to go home. And chuckled to himself. But that will change soon enough. My apologies, new recruits. He gestured towards the chairs. For now, have a seat. Yes, sir. The young scholars replied as they took their seats. Lee Sun-ji caught a familiar scent and thought. Just as I expected. This place has a familiar smell. He gripped the armrests of his chair. His emotions in turmoil. My heart is beating so fast. But in a way that's strangely comforting. I've never felt this before. He recalled the first time he had seen a book on mathematics in the attic where his grandfather's old keepsakes were stored. In that moment, countless unanswered questions rushed through his mind. The excitement he felt now was just like the first time he had encountered mathematics and its principles. At that moment, the deputy director spoke again. Now, I will tell you what you will be doing next. Does anyone here know about the Indian method of arithmetic? Lee Sun-ji raised his hand. I do, sir. The deputy director was surprised and asked. From what I know, the Indian method hasn't been widely spread yet. How did you come to learn it? Lee Sun-ji replied. I learned it through my interactions with merchants. Sir. The deputy director asked again, but was met with silence. I see. Very good. Does anyone else know? Seeing that no one else responded, the deputy director turned back to Lee Sun-ji and asked. So, you're the only one who knows? What's your name? My name is Lee Sun-ji. Sir. The deputy director, upon hearing the name, recognized him. Ah, so you're the Lee Sun-ji. Your scores were almost a fail on the first day. But you topped the mathematics exam. He then assigned a task. Very well. Let this scholar help teach all of you the Indian method. Once you've learned it, you will continue with advanced mathematics. And finally, you will receive specialized training for your duties. I'll give you a month and a half to complete this training. For now, go back to your hometowns. Inform your parents of the news. And gather your belongings. Then return to Hansong. The Crown Prince has high expectations for all of you. And so do I. It's fortunate that we've met. So let's do our best together. The young scholars responded. We will do our best. Late afternoon at the Lee estate. Voices could be heard. Sun-ji's back. He's home. Rakuten reassured. The boy will definitely pass the exam. So don't worry. Lee Sun-ji's father, however, was still anxious. Sun-ji is only good at messing around. I'm afraid he'll end up doing trivial tasks. Which could harm the family's reputation. But then. His mother said something that left him speechless. Even if he passes both the lower and higher imperial exams. You still need a background like the upper nobility to land a high-ranking position. Do you think our family is like that? She continued. And do you really think our Sun-ji is talented enough for that? Her words struck him. And with a pained heart. He replied. You're right. But your words are harsh. As always. If the boy achieves great merit, there's still hope, he added, trying to stay optimistic. At that moment, Kan arrived with news, causing excitement. Master! Young Master Sun Ji has returned. Is that so? Sun Ji, I heard you were called to the palace. What happened? His father asked. Lee Sun Ji smiled and said, let's go inside first. Father, I'll tell you everything. Soon, night had fallen. Soldiers began patrolling the streets, enforcing the curfew as it approached the second hour. Inside the Lee household, the family was still deep in conversation. Sun Ji's father, still in disbelief, asked, where did you say? Lee Sun Ji answered, it's called the Institute for the Advancement of Science and Technology. It's an independent research institute under the Crown Prince, separate from the 6 ministries. They say they highly value people skilled in calculations. His parents exchanged astonished looks before rushing to embrace him with joy. Oh my! You've done well, my son. Working for the Crown Prince? This is unbelievable. We must celebrate with a feast. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Palace, He Yang was reviewing something. He looked at it thoughtfully for a moment and then said, these are the results of the mathematics exam. I think it would have been better if father had personally taken charge of this. The next morning, at the prince's residence, the chief chef announced, Your Highness, the crown prince is here to see you. Let him in. The prince replied. He Yang entered, knelt on the floor, and greeted his father. Did you sleep well, father? The prince responded. Yes, I did. How about you? He Yang? Then He Yang said something that surprised him. Father. In truth, I couldn't sleep. There's something I need to discuss with you. The prince thought to himself. This boy again. Is he about to nag me? He asked. What's bothering you now? I've been jump roping diligently today. You know. He Yang hesitated before speaking. Ah. It's not about that. Father. No, what I mean is, it's good that you're exercising in the morning. I wanted to thank you, father, for the results of the recent periodic review. The prince, leaning on his hand, replied. Oh. So it's about that? This is the first time I've received thanks from the Research Institute. So, what was it you wanted to ask me about this morning? Go ahead. Meanwhile, at the Research Institute, Jiang Beitoa was deeply engrossed in his work. Does this method work? He thought to himself. Suddenly, someone arrived looking for him. Jiang Beitoa. Are you here? Is something wrong? He asked. The Crown Prince has summoned you. The messenger replied. Without hesitation, Jiang Beitoa left immediately. When he arrived, he saw He Yang standing there. Crown Prince? Jiang greeted, bowing. Without turning around, He Yang said, Jiang Beitoa. I've received the results of the recent periodic review. This is the first audit since the Research Institute was established. He Yang then turned around, his face serious. Whatever you say, you need to apologize immediately. I've spoken to the eunuchs. Go change into your formal attire. Jiang Beitoa, confused, responded. Yes, Your Highness. But internally, he was puzzled. Why is His Highness suddenly so cold? Did I make a serious mistake? On the way, He Yang kept urging. Hurry up. Yes, Your Highness. Jiang replied, still wondering what was happening. Suddenly, He Yang smiled. Oh, you're just in time. 3 military officers approached and bowed deeply. Greetings, Your Highness. How are you? He Yang glanced at Jiang Beitoa and introduced the officers. These are the captains of the military and future craftsmen. I'll be working with them. Jiang, feeling dejected, thought to himself. Is His Highness planning to dismiss me? He remembered their first meeting, which had been quite humorous. It felt like he could see right through me. That day was strange. Lost in thought. Jiang wasn't even aware of where he was standing. Eanshan. He thought to himself. It's time to wake up from this dream. Suddenly. He Yang's voice broke his reverie. Father. They've arrived. Jiang slowly opened his eyes. Realizing where he was. He Yang was standing in front of him. Bowing. Thank you. Father. For listening to my request. The prince. Seated on the throne. Replied. It's nothing. A king should do this. You've done well. Crown Prince. Startled. Jiang and the 3 military officers quickly knelt down and bowed deeply. We greet your majesty. The emperor. The prince spoke kindly. Don't say such things. You are all citizens of my realm. How could you be considered lowly? Moreover, as the crown prince mentioned, haven't you all worked diligently this past year? He then turned to the royal chef. Khan. Read the decree I have issued. The royal chef immediately lifted the decree and said, Yes. Your Highness. I will read the decree according to your command. The decision has been made to appoint Jiang Yangsen from the Research Institute to the 5th rank. Jiang Bieto was shocked. What? He lifted his head to look at Heian, who was already looking at him. Heian bowed as he listened to the decree. And Jiang, overwhelmed with emotion, began to cry. The crown prince. You didn't intend to throw me out after all? The royal chef continued reading. Additionally, military officers Cham Bong Gompale, Bok Yong Min Su, and Choi Chillerduk will be promoted to the 8th rank. You 3 will now work at the Research Institute. The 3 military officers were equally moved to tears. Thank you. Your Highness. When the formalities were over, the prince spoke again. The reason I have personally promoted you all is to commend your service. But also to warn you. Promotion comes with greater responsibility. So you must always keep this in mind. Both I and the crown prince have high expectations for you. The prince glanced at Heian. And they exchanged looks. Well. Crown prince. What do you think? Is this enough? Yes. Father. This is more than enough. Heian replied. This will motivate them to work even harder. Heian smiled with satisfaction. This will also allow them to unlock more of their potential. Which will, in turn, improve their work. Jiang Bitoa and the military officers bowed deeply. We are eternally grateful. Your Highness. We will risk our lives to meet your expectations. Long live the Emperor. Long live the Emperor. The next morning, a figure emerged from the house. Lee Sun-ji was in an exceptionally good mood, swinging his arms like a lucky cat. The weather is so nice. Dawkins approached and asked. Young master. No, my lord. How did you sleep last night? Lee Sun-ji replied cheerfully. Very well. Thank you. Dawkins smiled. Jordan. The nanny. Said everyone else had trouble sleeping last night. Yes. My lord. He added. Lee Sun-ji's parents had given him a small house with 3 rooms. One for Jordan. One for the nanny who had taken care of him since childhood. And one for himself. Feeling inspired, Lee Sun-ji encouraged himself. This is the beginning of my journey. I must keep moving forward. At the Research Institute, the deputy director warmly greeted the group. I'm very happy to see you all again. It's been a month and a half. Hasn't it? I'm glad to see you all looking healthy. The young scholars responded in unison. We're glad to see you in good health as well. Sir. Suddenly, a voice rang out from outside, causing everyone to turn their heads. These are the scholars who passed the exam. Correct? The deputy director replied. Yes. Your Highness. They are. Lee Sun-ji and the others were shocked. Their mouths agape. The crown prince? Could this really be him? They wondered as he approached, walking with great dignity. As soon as they recognized him, the young scholars quickly bowed. We respectfully greet the Crown Prince. He ain't glanced at one of the scholars dressed in orange and asked. You are Han Ingu. Correct? Yes. Your Highness. It is an honor. Han Ingu replied. He ain't moved to the next person. And you are Park Jae-hun? That's correct. Your Highness. It is an honor to be recognized by you. The reason he ain't knew all their faces was because he had spoken with Jiang Bayatoa the day before. He had asked a favor of him. Is there anything you need? Your Highness. Jiang had asked. I'd like your help. He ain't had said. Tomorrow. When the scholars who passed the exam arrive at the institute. Could you sketch their faces for me? Jiang had been taken aback. You want me to draw their portraits? But I've never done that before. He ain't had explained. Don't think of it as drawing portraits. Consider it an analysis of their faces. Focusing on capturing their distinct features. Recalling that conversation. He ain't knew Jiang Bayatoa had an eye for detail. So he trusted him with the task. He ain't continued calling out the names. Making the scholars emotional and teary-eyed. You're Kim Jong-soo. Correct? Yes. Your Highness. It's an honor to be recognized. And you must be Park Tui. Right? Yes. Your Highness. It's a great honor. Finally. He ain't stopped in front of Lee Sun-ji. And you are. At that moment. Lee Sun-ji wasn't paying attention. Instead. He was distracted by a familiar scent. I recognize this smell. He thought. Breathing it in deeply. He ain't smiled and called his name. Lee Sun-ji. Startled. Lee Sun-ji quickly bowed. Yes. Your Highness. It is a great honor. Still distracted by the scent. Lee Sun-ji thought to himself. I finally figured it out. The smell I noticed on the day the results were announced. He ain't praised him. Your performance in the exam was remarkable. Lee Sun-ji. Embarrassed. Replied. You're too kind. Your Highness. I'm just an ordinary person. He ain't glanced at Jiang Bayatoa and said. Don't be so modest. Even Lord Dongsho remarked that the exam was incredibly difficult. Jiang Bayatoa added. The questions were set by a mathematics expert. Which made some of them quite hard to understand. As he ain't smiled at him. Lee Sun-ji became more confident in his realization. Yes. It's the same familiar scent. Exactly the same. After greeting everyone. He ain't smiled and said. I believe you all will achieve great things. The young scholars. Filled with enthusiasm. Responded in unison. This is an honor for us. He ain't then turned to young scholar and said. Young scholar. You will supervise the training of the students. Correct? Then let's get started immediately. Yes. Your Highness. I will fulfill my duties to the best of my ability. Young scholar replied. As the students walked away. He ain't thought to himself. By the way. Lee Sun-ji. That name sounds familiar. Isn't he an important historical figure? Maybe this is the consequence of not paying enough attention to history. Young scholar led the students on a tour of the institute. This will be the lecture hall where you will work in the upcoming months. Each table will seat 3 people. Scholar Lee Sun-ji. You'll sit at the table in the back by yourself. Standing on the platform. He instructed them. From now on. You are no longer scholars. But apprentices of the Rajan Institute of Science and Development. I am young scholar. And I will supervise your training. From this point forward. You will address your supervisors as professors. And you will respond with. Yes. Professor. Do you understand? Yes. Professor. The students replied. Do you really understand what I mean? Young scholar asked again. Yes. Professor. Very well. Let me introduce the professor. Who will teach you the foundations of number theory in your first class. Please welcome Professor Hassan. The door immediately opened. And as the professor entered, the students gasped in shock. Professor Hassan stood there with an imposing presence. Watching the room. The students whispered among themselves. Isn't that him? He's the legendary strategist. His skin is so dark. How is he here in the palace? Hearing this, young scholar angrily rebuked them. How disrespectful. This is a master from the kingdom of Antic. Personally summoned by His Highness. You will be penalized for such behavior. Your academic performance will be graded. And those who receive too low a score after completing the lessons will be expelled. The students, terrified, immediately apologized. We're sorry. We'll remember this. Professor. Professor Hassan bowed slightly and introduced himself. I am Hassan. During your training, you may call me Professor. I will teach you about Arabic numerals and the language of Yashin. While I know only a little of it, I am fully capable of understanding and explaining it to you. Lee Sun-ji realized. He's the one who created the mathematics exam. I wonder what we'll learn. I'm really looking forward to it. As the day drew to a close, Professor Hassan said, today's lesson ends here. Tomorrow, we'll continue. Yes. Professor. Thank you. Professor. The students replied. As Lee Sun-ji was walking, he heard Park Jae-hun call out to him from behind. Scholar Lee Sun-ji. Lee turned around and asked, are you calling me? Senior. Park Jae-hun introduced himself. My name is Park Jae-hun. I'm from Ronaldo. It seems like the others in class don't like talking much. Let's help each other out. Okay? Lee Sun-ji replied warmly. Ah, I see. It's nice to meet you. Senior. Then two more people came over to introduce themselves. And I'm Park Boy from Jeonchul. I'm Kim Jang-soo from Hanseon. Let's work together. Yes. I'm Lee Sun-ji. He replied. One of them chimed in. You're the top student in mathematics. Right? Please help me out. I didn't understand anything today. Lee Sun-ji smiled. I'm happy to help. Meanwhile, Han In-gu looked on with displeasure. Ha! Things look different now. I really dislike those Korean American families. That evening, in a brightly lit study, He Yang was discussing the day's events with members of the Research Institute. Today was the first day of classes. What's your overall impression? He Yang asked. Since it was the first day, everyone was quite enthusiastic. There weren't any issues. Someone replied. Professor Hassan added. Student Lee Sun-ji's understanding is exceptional. I think my younger brother, who's away on business, would be thrilled to meet him. Young scholar also praised Lee Sun-ji. His skills are outstanding. And the other students tend to gather around him for help. He Yang, stroking his chin thoughtfully, said. If they can motivate each other to improve, that's great. But there will surely be envy among them. I hope you all guide them well, so that everyone has a chance to grow. Everyone responded in unison. Yes. Your Highness. The next day, Professor Hassan clapped his hands on a stack of assignments and said, this week has been tough on all of you. Well done on this exam. With this, our class on the Indian method will come to an end. Kim Jang-do and Park Boy sighed. Exhausted. It was so difficult. It's almost laughable. Agreed. It was much harder than I expected. Park Boy added. Kim Jang-do turned to Lee Sun-ji. But I managed to finish all the questions. Thanks to this scholar. You're tutoring me. Thanks a lot. Lee Sun-ji smiled and replied. Don't mention it. I learned a lot from helping you. Han In-gu chimed in with a haughty tone. Oof. We don't even have the results yet. So why are you all so excited? Suddenly, Professor Hassan cleared his throat and spoke up. I've heard everything. Lee Sun-ji. You've been the top student in class and have been helping your classmates with their studies. Han In-gu, hearing the praise for Lee Sun-ji, became even more bitter. Susie this. Susie that. He muttered under his breath. Suddenly, Professor Hassan raised his voice. The Indian method class has ended. It seems some of you still haven't grasped everything. Those who score below 40 will have to take supplementary lessons. If there's no improvement, you'll be expelled. The students, stunned by this, fell silent. Professor Hassan continued. This afternoon, we'll begin specialized training. It's much more difficult than the Indian method. You must complete it well. Don't give up halfway. We should meet each other as colleagues one day. Lee Sun-ji smiled and replied. Yes, Professor. In his heart, he thought. At first, I had some reservations because the professor is from a different ethnic group and isn't fluent in Korean. But through this, I realized that numbers and symbols are universal. They transcend language barriers and connect people across cultures. He mentally thanked the professor. Thank you, Professor. No, Master. Professor Hassan glanced at him with a slightly surprised and intense expression, as if he sensed something deeper. Later, He Yang reviewed the test results, holding the papers in his hand. These are the results of the Indian method exam, he asked. Professor Hassan, sitting across from him, responded. A bit lower than the final exam. But no one scored below 40. Hassan added. This is all thanks to Lee Sun-ji. Excellent work. He Yang, fired up with determination, clenched his fist and said. Then let's enhance their specialized training and raise their level even further. Yes, Your Highness, Hassan replied. Suddenly, the door to the lecture hall swung open, and the students gasped in surprise. What now? They wondered. Looking around, the deputy director of the research institute observed the person carrying in a stack of books and said, All right. Place them on the table. You've worked hard. The person carrying the books replied. It's no trouble at all. If you need anything, feel free to ask. The students watched in confusion as the two exchanged pleasantries. Then the deputy director placed his hand on the stack of books and addressed the class. It's been quite some time since your first day. As the deputy director, I will now oversee your specialized training. Come up and receive these books. He continued. This book contains information about the recovery process after last year's flood. However, it's not entirely accurate. Your first task is to analyze the errors. Note the reasons for correction. And write a report. You'll have ample time. So work carefully. He instructed. Lee Sun-ji looked at the book with a smile, thinking. Oh ho. So the problem lies here. First, I need to change the statistical data using the Indian method. Then perform the inverse calculation. Meanwhile, He Nong-Gu, unable to find the solution, grew increasingly frustrated, shouting. My head's about to explode. And my ears are smoking. I don't understand anything. Where do I even begin? He stood up, ready to leave. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Kim Jang-do quickly patted his shoulder, trying to calm him down. Relax. If you want to work in the royal court, you had to endure. It's only been an hour. And you're already giving up? Suddenly, Lee Sun-ji stood up and started guiding Han In-gu. You need to convert the totals into ratios. Then perform the inverse calculation. Focus on the smaller numbers instead of the large ones. After helping Han In-gu, Lee Sun-ji brought his completed work up to the professor. I've finished everything, including correcting the report. Already? The deputy director of the research institute reviewed his work and said. I'll look over your report. So go back to your seat. However, instead of returning to his seat, Lee Sun-ji went around helping other students with their work. Do it like this for this part. And for this section. You should. Watching this, the deputy director sighed to himself. No wonder Lee Sun-ji received so much attention. That night, a voice echoed in the room. Here are the results after 3 months of training. He Yang, seated with the other members of the research institute, picked up the results and said. It's been a tough time for all of you. I won't forget your contributions. The deputy director and young scholar both replied. Please don't say that. Your Highness. This work has been valuable for us. After all. Isn't this all for the future of the research institute? He Young turned to the deputy director. Thank you for saying that. How has the specialized training been going? Is everything still progressing well? The deputy director stroked his beard and replied. I followed your Highness's orders. And had the students apply their skills in real-world scenarios immediately. We had them analyze and interpret actual data from last year. Even during specialized training. Lee Sun-ji stood out as an expert in mathematics. He has been helping struggling students. And forming small study groups to work together. Professor Hassan added. During the Indian method in basic arithmetic lessons, Sun-ji helped weaker students improve significantly. Those who had to attend supplementary classes have shown considerable improvement. And it's all thanks to Sun-ji. He Yang, hearing about the research group, asked himself. A research group? Huh? Then he spoke aloud. That's great news. So, all that's left is the appointment process. Right? Young scholar responded. Yes. That's correct. The students will accumulate experience in various departments over the next 3 months. And after that, they will receive approval for their official appointments based on their strengths. He Yang, feeling satisfied, said. So, 3 more months. This is a long-standing procedure from the time of Joseon. Suddenly, the deputy director of the research institute asked a question that startled He Yang. What does I don't care mean? He had blurted out the phrase without thinking. And He Yang, caught off guard, explained. Well, simply put, it refers to seniors and juniors working together and enduring for 3 months. The group seemed intrigued by the term. You used a Western language earlier? If it means 3 months. It sounds good. They suggested. Let's use that as the official name for the process. Ignoring their chatter, He Yang turned away and muttered to himself. My mouth. I need to stop using modern language. The deputy director then addressed the prince seriously. Your Highness. Even though they're only on probation, they will still need ranks, titles, and emblems for Area 51. I mentioned it in the report. But I think it's better for you to decide. He Yang became serious again and replied. Yes. We'll have the students observe various departments. But there's no reason to place all of them in Area 51. We'll only select 4 of them to go there. First and foremost, student Lee Sun-ji. The deputy director asked. Then what rank should be assigned to student Lee Sun-ji? The next morning, at the State Council Hall, the prince reviewed the petitions and was taken aback. A scholar being given the 5th rank? Isn't that too high? He Yang, standing below, responded. The scholars from Sunxian 1 are assigned the 6th rank. So, before he could finish, the prince interrupted. That's exactly why I'm saying this. The top scholars only reached the 6th rank. Isn't the 5th rank too high? Bowing low, He Yang replied. I believe he is deserving of that rank. Father. However, the prince wasn't convinced. If this is solely based on academic results, that's not enough to be considered an accomplishment. If you want to assign ranks, you must show me what this person has actually achieved. The highest rank I've given to a student so far is the 6th rank. Determined, He Yang tried to press on. But, Father. Before he could continue, the prince raised his hand, signaling him to stop. Hold on. Crown Prince. I know you are intelligent and perform your duties efficiently. I also know that you are fair in your rewards and punishments. But the most important principle in all of this is fairness. He Yang listened attentively as the prince continued. This person, Lee Sun-ji, as you said, might be very talented. But if you assign him the 5th rank, do you think the people working in other departments will accept it? He Yang, after hearing his father's words, suddenly realized the implications. The prince continued. They won't recognize Lee Sun-ji's talent. Instead, they'll assume he succeeded because he worked in a research institute. If not for this issue, I wouldn't hesitate to accept your suggestion. But I have no choice but to assign him the 6th rank. You understand my reasoning, don't you? Feeling a bit disheartened, He Yang replied. Yes, father. I will follow your decision. The prince looked at him thoughtfully and said, I'm glad you understand. As a ruler, my duty is not just to care for the people but to ensure fairness. In the end, Lee Sun-ji was assigned the 6th rank. Despite this, he was recognized as the highest achieving scholar in the research institute, and one of the top performers in the specialized training program. The so-called Inang Sandal program was divided into 4 groups, with 3 members per group, 1 researcher and 2 students. Lee Sun-ji was placed in the first group and assigned practical training in Area 51. Somewhere else, Lee Sun-ji, curious about the process, asked, This isn't the palace, is it? Professor, where are we heading? Young scholar, who is leading the way, replied, I'm no longer a professor. Since the training has ended, I'm now just a researcher. Don't worry about the ranks of the researchers. Just call me Senior In. Yes, Senior In, Lee Sun-ji replied. No need to call me that, young scholar said. You can just call me Senior In Scholar. Jiang Bieto added. You can call me Senior Choi. Everyone here follows this rule. It's the policy of the Research Institute, established by the Crown Prince, to allow everyone to express their ideas freely. Titles and age don't matter here. Your skills will determine your worth. The students were surprised by this as they neared a guarded area. Young scholar announced. We're almost there. This is Area 51. The doors began to open, and 2 guards saluted. Stand at attention. He stepped out from inside, smiling. Come on in. Our hope for the future. Everyone quickly bowed. Greetings, Crown Prince. All right. All right. No need for formalities, He said, waving them off. He raised a golden badge and explained. You can't enter Area 51 without this badge. Don't lose it. Lee Sun-ji took the badge in his hand, thinking to himself, wow, this is heavier than I expected. He turned and introduced the area. This is the foundation of my dream to develop Roshan. I hope you'll join me in making that dream a reality. Lee Sun-ji, smiling, called out to the Crown Prince. Your Highness. As everyone entered the area, the 2 guards immediately locked the doors behind them. Lee Sun-ji, puzzled, thought to himself. I just walked through. So why is the security so strict? He led the group down a desolate path lined with trees. When they reached their destination, the young scholars were startled and stepped back, covering their ears as they saw soldiers firing guns. Lee Sun-ji noticed something flying in the sky. And within moments, an explosion erupted in the forest ahead. The scholars were so shocked that their eyes widened and their mouths hung open in disbelief. He, seeing their reaction, smirked. Despite the loud explosions behind him, he spread his arms wide and said with a smile, Welcome, everyone, to Area 51. Shortly after, General Choi approached and introduced himself. I am Choi Hee-san, the one responsible for supervising your work here in Area 51. It's a pleasure to meet you, Director. He continued, offering guidance. National defense is the strength of our nation, and its foundation is weaponry. You must thoroughly understand our weapon systems and identify areas where they can be improved. We will give our best effort. The officers then proceeded to teach the scholars how to use firearms, followed by lessons on cannons and even the structure of various weapons. Everyone worked diligently, running back and forth to gather materials. By the time they had completed everything, they were utterly exhausted, barely able to catch their breath. Sitting in a corner, they complained. Oh, my goodness. It's done. The Research Institute was tough. But Area 51 is something else entirely. I've been here for a month, and I can count the times I've gone home on one hand. I feel like I'm going to die. Suddenly, Director Yang, looking equally worn out, threw open a window and shouted, "If you're that tired, just take a break." The scholars jumped, startled. Director Yang! Director Yang! Clearly annoyed. Frightened. "Do you want me to report you to the higher-ups? You passed the exam. Which is why you're here working. Instead of sitting there complaining. Why don't you get back to work?" The scholars fell silent, glancing at each other. Then director and scholar advised them. Don't think of the work as difficult. Instead, find joy in your work. If you do well, it won't just be the crown prince who rewards you. Even the king will recognize your efforts. Suddenly, Lee Sun-ji's voice called out. Director. Director Yang turned his head and looked inside the research building. Lee Sun-ji. Are you finished yet? The scholars peeked in, marveling at him. Wow. He's always like this. Working non-stop like a madman. Hey Nong-ji-yu. Clearly upset. Crossed his arms and muttered. I don't like that guy at all. On another day at the research institute, Hey Nong-ji-yu spotted Lee Sun-ji, happily carrying a thick stack of documents. Han In-gu, with a smug expression, asked, Where are you off to in such a hurry? Lee Sun-ji smiled warmly. Ah. You're heading to the lab today too? You all must be working hard. As Lee Sun-ji walked away, Hey Nong-ji-yu, along with a few others, began to mock him. I wonder if he eats the same food as us. Someone sneered. Hey Nong-ji-yu added. I'm sure there's something different about him. Every family's different. After all, doesn't his family have a bit of, well, something unusual? He spoke loudly enough for Lee Sun-ji to hear. That's why he's not like the rest of us. That's a bit harsh. Don't you think? Someone remarked. Who knows if his blood is even as red as ours? Hey Nong-ji-yu added with a smirk. Lee Sun-ji, now furious, clenched his fist so tightly that his hands trembled, and veins bulged on his arms. Turning slightly, he said with a cold, cutting tone. I hope one day you'll see for yourselves. Unlike his usual friendly demeanor, Lee Sun-ji now exuded a menacing aura, driven by a fierce determination. I need to push past my limits, he thought, silently vowing. Just wait. I'll make sure you pay for this. Elsewhere, He Yang was in conversation with Director N. He Yang asked. What do you mean by that? Director N responded. Yes. Crown Prince. Researcher Lee Sun-ji should have been officially appointed from the start. It might seem early, but I believe you should consider appointing him as an official government official sooner. He Yang, now understanding the gravity of the situation, replied. If Director N says so, then the deputy director must also agree. Director N nodded. Yes. Your Highness. He entrusted me with handling this. Indeed. Researcher Lee Sun-ji has been exceptional. Still unsure. He Yang asked. It's only been a month. Yet you say he's shown such potential? The training is supposed to last 3 months. Is he really worth breaking precedent for? Director N bowed and answered. Yes. Your Highness. Lee Sun-ji's abilities far surpass those of the other researchers. However, because he's still in training, his work has been restricted. He Yang, deep in thought, rested his chin on his hand. Then we should make the most of his talents. After a moment, he said, I trust your judgment. Since you're overseeing his progress, I'll expedite this matter as soon as possible. Thank you. Your Highness. Director N replied gratefully. On another day at the Research Institute, the voice of a scholar echoed. Today, we will be conducting an assessment of all of you. First, we'll begin by testing in groups. Suddenly, Kim Jang-ju and Park Boy spoke up, interrupting. Excuse me. Director. Researcher Lee Sun-ji hasn't arrived yet. He's not the type to be late. The director replied. Ah. Don't worry. Starting today, Researcher Lee Sun-ji will be assigned to a different task. Hainong-gu, feeling a surge of joy, thought to himself. Finally. That thorn in my side is gone. He worked, grinning to himself with smug satisfaction. Without him around, I'm the best researcher here. I'll use this opportunity to prove myself. But his moment of glee was short-lived. His face fell into a scowl as he saw someone in front of him. Lee Sun-ji was sitting in the director's chair. Lee Sun-ji, noticing Hainong-gu's reaction, asked, "Why do you look so shocked? Are you thinking something over?" Instead of answering, Hainong-gu fired back. "Why are you sitting in the director's seat?" Lee Sun-ji smiled and replied, "I've been officially appointed as a full researcher. From today, my first task is to review all of your calculations." Hainong-gu, in disbelief, protested. "This is ridiculous. There's no way this is happening." Lee Sun-ji stood up, snatching the report from Hainong-gu's hands, and said, "If you have any concerns or want to file a complaint, feel free to report it. But the Crown Prince is quite busy. So if you're going to act, do it quickly. Without my approval, you won't be able to submit any reports." He continued, "In simple terms, your report depends on my review." Sitting back down, Lee Sun-ji began looking over the report, saying, "Now, let's see how my fellow scholars did with their calculations." Hainong-gu, seething with anger, couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, Lee Sun-ji pointed out the mistakes. "You calculated this part wrong." Hainong-gu, defensive, retorted, "That's impossible. Are you deliberately trying to nitpick at my work?" Lee Sun-ji, still calm and helpful, responded, "I'll show you the correct formula for this part. You do it like this and that." Then, with a bit of criticism, he added, "I can't believe you made such a simple mistake. Have you ever considered reassessing your own calculation skills?" Lee Sun-ji walked along, lost in thought. It had been half a year since he took the official civil service examination. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel a burst of joy. Wasn't it practically a transformation of body and soul? He had been spending time with merchants, helping them with calculations to pass the time. Just yesterday, he'd been scolded by his father for working on a math problem. All that time had been radiant. Numbers were wonderful. Some numbers, not so much. Precise numbers or endless varieties of other numbers. Every day that passed was amazing. Kim Young-ju and Park Jae-hoon would always greet him warmly whenever they met, saying, "Senior Lee Sun-ji, how's your health?" He'd smile and respond, "Stop teasing me." Then, whenever he met Han Young-ji and another person, he'd change his tone and chide them. "Don't you know how to greet your senior? If you can't calculate, you don't know how to greet properly. Right? Empty-headedness must feel pretty light. Ha!" After saying this, he'd stride off proudly. Han Young-ji would fume at the sight. But the other person would hold him back, saying, "Calm down. There's nothing you can do about a researcher favored by both the Crown Prince and the deputy director." Lee Sun-ji exhaled slightly as he walked, thinking to himself, "All right. Now's not the time to dwell on the past." He opened the door, mentally listing his achievements. Lee Sun-ji, ranked 6th official, and senior researcher at the Joseon Institute for the Development of Science and Technology. Everyone inside was already waiting, but he was still lost in his own thoughts. If the country had the High Officials Council meetings, the Research Institute had its Special Personnel Operations meeting, also called the Special Meeting, directly presided over by the Crown Prince. "Sorry, but I'm a member of this special meeting as well," he thought. At that moment, Hyung spoke up. "The special meeting has added a few new members. These members may be a bit unusual, but thank you all for accepting them." The deputy director of the institute smiled and replied, "I understand. Your Highness. Anyone with Lee Sun-ji's abilities is worthy of a warm welcome." Lee Sun-ji glanced at a few notable faces, thinking to himself, "Moreover, Jang Young-sil was once part of Hanmi. But compared to the two new members from Antakik, who barely spoke Korean, that was nothing special. Seeing him sit still, Hyung urged, "Researcher Lee, please stand up and greet everyone." Hearing this, he replied, "Yes, Your Highness." He then stood and greeted everyone, saying, "Thank you all for valuing my still developing abilities. I will do my best to live up to the expectations of the Crown Prince and all the esteemed elders here." The officials looked at him approvingly. Hyung also praised him, saying, "Thanks to all of you. The vacant positions here have been filled. Now we can focus our key personnel on projects I have long envisioned. Specifically, developing our own calendar." Lee Sun-ji was confused by this statement. "A calendar?" Hyun continued. "We've been working to modify the Ming calendar to suit our nation's needs, and have made some progress." Evening had fallen, but the meeting continued in the room. "Father, do you remember the rescue ceremony a few years ago?" Hyung asked. "Yes, I remember. The solar eclipse was delayed by 15 minutes. Hyung raised a finger and explained. "This happened because the Ming calendar no longer aligns with our Joseon. So, to correct this, I researched a few mathematical formulas to adjust the calendar. However, after thorough research, I've concluded that Joseon needs its own calendar. The calculation process for the Ming calendar is not only long and complex, but also prone to errors, as it must be calculated in advance, which could lead to severe inaccuracies." Hearing this, the deputy director of the institute and Scholar Young both bowed and said in unison, "We apologize. It's due to our lack of ability." Hyun immediately waved them off. "No, I don't mean to blame you." He said this, though internally, he thought, "Honestly, I'm not even sure where to start." Inwardly, he was berating his past self, wanting to grab himself by the collar and shout, "Good heavens! You all should have learned more mathematics." Past self. No, future self. No, my past self. After composing himself, he spoke up. "Let's run full speed with the new members." Immediately, everyone responded in unison, "We'll do our best." On another day, Lee Sun-ji was conversing with Professor Hassan and his younger brother. "This is Jahander, the younger brother I mentioned earlier," Hassan introduced. Jahander clasped his hands and greeted. "I am Amir Jahander from Persia. I look forward to your guidance." Lee Sun-ji introduced himself. "I am Lee Sun-ji from Anseong." As the three of them walked and talked, Hassan mentioned, "The Ming calendar was also created based on Persian astronomical calculations." "That's true," Lee Sun-ji replied. "Your Korean is quite good. My younger brother Jahander didn't study as much as I did, but he speaks it better." As they approached a shelf filled with books on calendars, Jahander remarked, "Here are all the books on calendars. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me or Jahander." Lee Sun-ji sat down, leafing through the calendar books while mumbling to himself. The Shoshir calendar used since Goryeo and the Dadong calendar of the Ming dynasty are both based on the Weiwei calendar, which uses mathematical formulas to replace previous astronomical records. For a moment, his face lit up with excitement. Mathematics. It's all mathematics. This is a paradise of numbers, he thought, brimming with excitement. Later that evening, in a secluded corner of the royal palace, Hyung walked slowly, his mind swirling with thoughts. Astronomy in this era is also a way to measure time, but it relies heavily on divine will. Essentially, only with precise calculations of celestial movements can the royal power touch the heavens. Astronomy legitimizes royal authority, so an accurate calendar that suits all 8 provinces of Joseon is essential. Suddenly, he noticed a room still illuminated and muttered, "Is someone still in there at this hour? That room must be." Lee Sun-ji was eagerly scribbling notes. "Oh, they used this equation? I don't know. Let's calculate it and see." Hearing the noise behind him, he turned around, startled. To his surprise, there was Hyung, standing there with an enigmatic look, asking, What has you so absorbed? This startled him so much that he let out a yelp. He quickly bowed. Good evening. Your Highness. Haiyan smiled and remarked. You're really passionate about this work. Researcher Lee Sun-ji. Haiyan walked over to the table, glancing at the drawings he had made, and asked. What's got you so focused that you didn't even notice me standing behind you? Fixing his cap. Lee Sun-ji responded. Ah. Yes. Your Highness. First, I'm trying to convert previous records into mathematical expressions. The average error is calculated by comparing and recalculating the dates of the spring equinox and Duanwu festival. Haiyan, resting his chin on his hand, thought to himself. As expected. Just as I anticipated. This equation. I don't understand it at all. It's entirely different from the mathematics I learned. After contemplating, he asked. What do you think is the biggest issue at present? Stroking his chin thoughtfully, Lee Sun-ji replied. There's not just one or two things. But the biggest issue here is its complexity. There are too many variables. Errors with leap years, leap months, leap days, and the different seasons. These variables can be adjusted by adding or subtracting, as seen in the main calendar records. Haiyan understood the issue and remarked. If that's the case, modifying the current calendar is pointless. Lee Sun-ji nodded in agreement. Yes. That's right. Mistakes will still occur. He continued. We'd have to adjust every year and repeat it every 2 or 3 years. I think this is pointless because, truthfully, it's quite simple. Haiyan pondered for a moment, then looked up at him. So you're using mathematical formulas to recalculate astronomy? Lee Sun-ji replied. Yes. That's correct. If we could calculate the movements of the sun and moon with formulas, it would be more accurate. He then criticized himself. However, I'm not skilled enough to derive the right formulas. Hearing this, Haiyan thought. If you didn't have enough skill, you wouldn't be in the research institute. You can't calculate accurately if you don't move beyond the geocentric model. After thinking for a while, Haiyan asked. What do you think about changing perspectives? Switching back and forth? Adjusting up and down? I read something about this in a Western book. He hesitated, asking. Front and back? Up and down? After chatting for a bit, Haiyan changed the subject. By the way, I'm feeling a bit hungry. Want to go grab something to eat? Hearing this, Lee Sun-ji quickly declined. No, I can manage. Your Highness. I don't need anything. Ignoring his refusal, Haiyan insisted. Come on. I don't want my people starving. Come along. This statement made his face flush with happiness. My people? After a while, Haiyan led Lee Sun-ji to another room and introduced it. This is a space for all researchers. Feel free to come and rest here anytime. Just then, palace maids brought in food, announcing. The food is here. Your Highness. Haiyan smiled. Thank you. Looking at the food before him, Lee Sun-ji exclaimed. Oh. It smells wonderful. Haiyan urged him. Go on. Eat. The ginseng root is a delicacy. Taking a bite, Lee Sun-ji hesitated. In that case, I'll begin. The moment he tasted it, he froze. The burst of flavors overwhelmed him, bringing pure delight to his senses. Delicious. Haiyan sipped his tea and asked. My father is also fond of this dish. How do you find the taste? Lee Sun-ji, brimming with excitement, replied. Yes. It's a unique blend of flavors. Bitter, salty, sweet. This is the first time I've experienced something like this. Haiyan pointed behind him and said. It's late. So everyone in the Eastern Palace is resting. But there are always 9 attendants on standby in the tea room over there. As for the ginseng root, it's not prepared often due to limited ingredients. But you're welcome to enjoy tea anytime. As Haiyan prepared to leave, he said. Well then, I'll be going. You should head back soon too. Lee Sun-ji quickly bowed. Yes. Your Highness. Good night. Walking away. Hyung thought smugly. How about that? The benefits for Research Institute staff. Once you taste them, there's no escape. Eat well. Stay healthy. And work long. When Hyung had gone, Lee Sun-ji finally sank into his seat, letting out a sigh and wondering. Is this really not a dream? Propping his chin up thoughtfully, he marveled. I can't believe he takes such good care of his subordinates. No wonder the Research Institute is so effective. There must be some kind of system that allows the sun, moon, and stars to move around this earth. To some extent, I can grasp the system. But why does it still seem wrong? Origin and conversion. Back and forth. Back and forth. Lost in thought, he clutched his head in frustration, muttering, if this continues, I'm going to get dizzy. Just then, a realization struck him, and he froze. Wait. Dizzy? Rotating? He quickly left his seat, moved to his desk, and jotted down a few notes, muttering excitedly to himself. Wait a moment. What if the center of this circle isn't the Earth? As dawn began to break, Lee Sun-ji was still engrossed in writing and sketching, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Finally, he put down his pen, his face filled with satisfaction as he exclaimed, this is it. He leapt to his feet, knocking over his chair in the process, and raised his hands to the sky, thinking with a thrill. The center of the universe isn't the Earth. Everything is finally aligning. Morning in the Eastern Palace. Someone opened the door and walked in. While writing something, Hyung said, it would be better to do it this way. Please submit it to the Ministry of War like this. He handed the paper to Scholar Young and added, also, I haven't seen a report from the Ministry of Law recently. It's been 7 days now. Young received the document and asked, yes. Your Highness. Haven't you received a separate report? With a serious expression, he continued, this concerns researcher Lee Sun-ji. There's a strange rumor spreading everywhere. I've heard people say he's lost his mind and hasn't been working for days. Hyung was shocked. What? Meanwhile, in the Research Institute's rest area, an odd sound echoed repeatedly. Lee Sun-ji sat slumped over his desk, chuckling to himself non-stop. The deputy director of the institute saw him and reprimanded loudly. Why are we only hearing about something this important now? Professor Hyson explained. Of course. The rumor about him losing his mind is false. And it's also untrue that he stopped working. The deputy director sighed. If the crown prince finds out about this, he'll surely be displeased. On another day, the deputy director opened the door and saw Lee Sun-ji still at his desk. He called out. Look at you. Researcher Lee Sun-ji. Why are you staying up all night again? Seeing that Lee Sun-ji didn't respond, the deputy director patted his shoulder. Hey, didn't you hear me? No matter how dedicated you are to your work, you should still be mindful of those around you. Noticing him slumped over the desk, he was startled. Huh? In an instant, he panicked and called out loudly. Don't tell me. Lee Sun-ji. But Lee Sun-ji, still half asleep, mumbled. I know already. Your Highness. The deputy director breathed a sigh of relief. I just lost 10 years of my life. He's just asleep. Researcher Lee Sun-ji. Go home and rest. He picked up Lee Sun-ji's drawings, looking puzzled. What on earth has he been working on in here for days? This. What is this? Then, his eyes widened as he realized something. No way. This is. Professor Hassan walked over, his jaw dropping as he exclaimed. Oh. What is this? He praised. Oh. This is incredible. Truly. Jahander came to look and agreed. This approach is truly remarkable. Suddenly, someone poked the deputy director's shoulder and asked, what exactly are you talking about? Reflexively, he replied, this is a revolutionary formula. The person persisted. That's why I'm asking, what is it? He replied gruffly. This formula could change the entire world. Stop bothering me. Look here. But when he turned back, he saw Hyang standing there, looking rather annoyed, which made him jump. He quickly bowed. Forgive me, Your Highness. Hyang waved it off. It's fine. What are you looking at so intently? He replied. I'm reviewing researcher Lee Sunji's formulas. Your Highness. Hyang, still groggy, picked it up and glanced at it, thinking to himself. I saw this last time, too. But I still don't understand a thing. For a moment, Hyang froze. But this. I recognize this. Calculating the parallax to measure the distance between stars? Is he calculating based on observations of Venus? He may not realize it yet. But parallax is the clearest evidence of the heliocentric model. His face gradually lit up with excitement. More precise observations might be needed for exact calculations. But just the idea is thrilling. Looking at Lee Sunji, still fast asleep, he thought to himself. This is it. This is the treasure I've been searching for. Then Hyang turned to the deputy director of the institute and instructed. Have someone take Lee Sunji to a resting room. And quickly call a doctor to help him recover. The deputy director bowed and replied. Yes, Your Highness. Hyang continued. And keep this a secret from the king until he completes this work. They all responded in unison. Understood, Your Highness. Someone then gazed up at the sky, wondering to themselves. It's not the sky, but the earth that's moving? Looking down at their own feet, they pondered. But if that's true, how can humans remain stationary? The deputy director of the institute was lost in thought. Could this hypothesis really make sense? No, I've seen the formulas myself. Haven't I? There's nothing wrong with those calculations. They're flawless. So, could it be that everything we've known until now is wrong? Just as he was deep in contemplation, he looked up to find Hyang standing in front of him, saying, Deputy Director, you seem troubled. He hesitated before replying. Ah, Crown Prince. Hyang offered a suggestion. Take a walk with me for a bit. When the mind is tangled, walking is the best way to clear it. As they strolled, with the deputy director following behind, he commented. This situation reminds me of when we discussed revising the calendar not long ago. Hyang smiled. Ah. Yes. Back then, we debated whether it was the sun or the earth that moved. The deputy director nodded. Yes. That's right. At that time, I thought Your Highness's ideas were quite absurd. Then, suddenly, he blurted out. What does this mean? Hyang glanced at the design on the table, explaining. This is the modified design of the Hantieni, adjusted in some details. I'll entrust its construction to researcher Jang Yun-sil. The deputy director objected. This isn't right. The center should be the sun, not the earth. Hyang was startled by his words. Deputy director. Why are you? The deputy director insisted. The sun and moon revolve around the earth. Where we stand. The ancient sages taught us so. Hyang paused, bewildered. Oh no, I forgot about this. How am I supposed to explain the heliocentric theory to them? I read about it in textbooks, but I can't remember the details. Yet another consequence of not studying. Professor Hassan chimed in. In my homeland, there were also those who made such claims. But the Inquisition killed them all. Thank God that Joseon does not have such an Inquisition. Frankly, I believe it too. I believe this earth is moving. Hyang outwardly smiled, though inwardly he thought. Thank you, Hassan. But unfortunately, that doesn't help much. Then he added, addressing the deputy director. This hypothesis is based on observations made through a telescope by a man named Copernicus in the West. Catching on, the deputy director replied skeptically. So you're saying the sages of the West were right, and the sages of China were wrong? I'll need more concrete evidence for that. Right now. Your Highness doesn't seem very convincing. Hyang. A bit pouty. Made a decision. I understand. We'll stop the Hantani project here. Then, returning to the present, the deputy director of the research institute remarked, I am a rational scholar as well. If I haven't seen the formulas myself, it's hard for me to accept that the words of the sages might be incorrect. Hyang stared ahead and said, whether it's the sun or the earth that moves, dawn still arrives. That's the order of nature. It has never and will never change. Now, tell me, deputy director. Turning back to face him, Hyang asked, do principles like loyalty and filial piety, cause and effect, change? Do the teachings of the sages change? Ultimately, we understand the will of nature. So our duty is to uphold the teachings of the sages, to care for the lives of the people. He aimed to help the deputy director shift his perspective, thinking to himself, a true scholar must hone the foundations. Only by understanding the root can one develop the correct solutions. And the foundation of a nation is its people. After a long conversation, Hyang changed the subject. Now, let's get back to work. The deputy director replied. Yes. Your Highness. 1 month later. At the research institute. Lee Sun-ji was walking wearily, holding something round in his trembling hands. Suddenly, Hyang appeared and stopped him, grabbing his hand. Hold on. Did you buy that from the Won family? Startled, Lee Sun-ji quickly replied. Your Highness. Yes. Yes. That's exactly it. Hyang turned and instructed the eunuch. Quickly. Take it. The eunuch immediately brought over a tray with a round pill identical to the one Lee Sun-ji had been holding. Yes. Your Highness. Seeing it in front of him, Lee Sun-ji exclaimed with delight. This. Hyang raised both fists in encouragement. This is a real Anong Neohwan pill crafted by our physician. Take it to boost your health. Waiting. You can do it. Lee Sun-ji promptly put the Anong Neohwan pill into his mouth, savoring it. Thank you, Your Highness. Then, he asked curiously about the strange word. But what does waiting mean? Exactly? Hyang, taken from the English word, hesitated before explaining. Oh. Well. It's waiting day. Focusing all your strength in your lower abdomen. Actually, I just made that up. Hearing this, Lee Sun-ji pointed to his stomach and marveled. Lower abdomen. It really does feel like the Anong Neohwan is gathering strength there. Hyang, at a loss for words, decided to take his leave. Well, I'll be going now. See you later. Lee Sun-ji bowed. Yes. Your Highness. I'll give my best Wadden Day effort. Later. In the Hall of State Affairs, Hyang's voice rang out. Today marks the end of the regular ceremonial council. We also have a special report today. Other than the heads of the 3 ministries and 6 boards, everyone else must leave. The officials responded in unison. Understood. Your Highness. In the lower seating area, the left state councillor whispered to the chief state councillor. Have you heard anything? The chief state councillor glanced at Hyang, standing across from him, and replied in a low voice. Not yet. But it seems to concern the crown prince. Just then, Hyang raised his voice. This is a special report from the research institute. Suddenly, the doors to the Hall of State Affairs opened, and someone entered. Lee Sun-ji knelt and bowed deeply. I, researcher Lee Sun-ji, greet your majesty and your highness. Seeing him, Hyang's demeanor softened. I've heard many rumors about you. They say you're highly skilled in calculations. I permit you to come forward and explain our new calendar to me and the esteemed civil and military officials. This statement caused a ripple of surprise among the officials. A new calendar? Standing before the assembly, Lee Sun-ji nervously held a sheet of paper and stammered. I, Lee Sun-ji, will begin explaining the new calendar invented by the Research Institute. Hyang, feeling a surge of anxiety, swallowed in thought. Can he convince these rational scholars?